replace the coach outside of trying to replace 15 players.
Rivers is the only coach in NBA history to lose a 3-1 lead in 3 playoff series.
I do think T. Lue should get real consideration. He has all of the winning pedigree that you want.
And for those that may not be familiar, of course, Ty Lue currently is an assistant on the Clippers bench. Of course, was the
How
head coach.
convenient.
Yes, when LeBron and company won the championship in 2016. It's sort of like a Nick Nurse situation. Maybe the answer is right there on your staff. When Dwayne Casey was fired by the Raptors, they just promoted their top assistant and Nick Nurse. Maybe it happens this way. Though, Jay, I would ask you this question. He is by far the most successful coach in Clippers history, though I'm not sure what that really means, to be honest with you. But in totality, let's be honest, he's been an NBA coach for 21 years. He's made the playoffs 16 times. He's got a championship. His bona fides are there. So the day after Steve Nash was hired as a Brooklyn Nets head coach, you were able to get Sean Marks, the general manager, on the show, and he essentially did say, look, my most important player wanted this guy to be our head coach, so he's our head coach. In this particular case, is it fair to say that maybe the Clippers' most important player had to weigh in on what he thought about the head coaching situation, and Kawhi played a big role?
It just smells weird. Has a weird smell to it. It feels, and this is my opinion, it feels like I watch a coup happen a coup. And what I mean by that is, think about 2020. There's been nothing normal about this year, okay, for this team. They played barely 25 games at full strength, healthy, with everybody healthy, okay? Going into this season, Kawhi and PG were coming off injuries where they had surgery. So you're still trying to find team chemistry with two new pieces to your team. The season shuts down for 3.5+ months. These guys come back into a bubble. Patrick Beverley is not there. Lou Will has the lemon pepper chicken wings experience. Montrezl Harrell, extra crispy. Montrezl Harrell comes back into the league after losing his grandmother. Right. Never was the same once he was back into the league. He's a sixth man of the year. Yep. Okay, a lot of moving parts. Now I know they're up 3-1 against the Denver Nuggets, and they lost that series. They should have won. A lot of excuses, but it just feels like that. It was all of a sudden. I never known Steve Ballmer to make a knee-jerk reaction. Right, especially considering all the things that have happened this year with this team. So my thing is, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, that's your line, Key. I should give $1 for your line. At the end of the day, how could Kawhi Leonard not sign off on that? He has to. Like, think about all the best players we have in the NBA. If there's a coaching change in Milwaukee, do you think Giannis is going to have something to do with it? If there is something that happens? Absolutely. If there's a coaching change in Cleveland, David Blatt, you don't think LeBron James had something to do with that to a degree?
He did.
Right? So at the end of the day, Steve Ballmer has to have some conversation with Kawhi Leonard about saying, hey, do you want to keep this guy or do you not want to keep this guy? I may want to move in this direction, but I did bring you here to be a staple of our franchise. What do you want to do? Now, regardless of whether Kawhi's indifferent or not, that answer speaks for itself. And I'm not saying it's wrong, or I don't think they should have made this move. I think you should have made some other personnel moves on the team first before you make a coaching move. But at the end of the day, Kawhi Leonard had to sign off on this, guys. He had to.
It certainly, as you say, smells like a Kawhi Leonard would have to have signed off on it alone, possibly with a PG. I mean, it's one of those situations where sometimes you get a coach that can only take you so far. Did Doc deserve to be let go or part mutually? I mean, it depends on who you're asking, right? They've never gotten out of the second round.
Ever.
With teams that it looked like he should have been able to get out of the second round with, whether it was the Lob City guys or whether it was this group. If in fact Kawhi Leonard listened to the powers that be, whether it was Steve Ballmer along with Jerry Weston, the general manager. You got to remember a couple years ago, Doc Rivers wore two hats, the general manager and the head coach. They eventually allowed him to stay on as the head coach. So this is not something that Steve Ballmer and the powers that be came up with overnight. They've already been looking at how to get the Clippers over the hump. This is just probably the end of the line in a situation where they feel like going with a potential different voice is the better way to go.
I think here's part of the problem with the Clippers. Doc was the leader of this team, right? Like, it didn't feel like they had a leader on the court saying, follow me. That's not who Kawhi is. Kawhi is one of the best players there is in the league, but Kawhi does not talk. He's not external saying, follow me. He plays by his actions on the court. So when I look at Kawhi and I look at him in San Antonio, he was one of their best players, but that team was led by Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker. When he was in Toronto, he was their best player, but that team was led by Kyle Lowry. Look what Toronto has done to get back to where they got to this year. The heart and soul of that team was Kyle Lowry. So now you bring Kawhi to the Clippers, still the best player in the team, but Paul George wasn't a leader, right? Paul George isn't telling people what to do, where to be. Patrick Beverley is a guy that plays defensively, but he's kind of not that guy. You need your best player to be the guy externally too, right? Montrezl Harrell, kind of quiet. I mean, think about all the pieces. They don't have a leader on this team. So my thing is when I think about, hey, we need a different voice, well, I think you actually need a different voice from a player perspective. And I will say this. I know he's probably not going to be in OKC anymore. And he was originally a Clipper when it started. You look at bringing CP3 back to the Clippers.
Whoa.
You look at bringing him back to the Clippers because I'm telling you right now, he will be the missing link from a leadership perspective for this team that they need. He is the pit bull that will tell people where to go. And also that allows Kawhi not to have that pressure on him to be that galvanizing force for everybody on that team. And I'm telling you, he will be the missing answer for that squad.
Keep in mind, both Paul George and Kawhi can opt out, become unrestricted free agents at the end of next season. So this is a all or nothing year in some ways. So you really have to think about that when you try to bring in the right coach. The short-term future for the organization essentially rests on what happens the next upcoming season. So what are the other logistical challenges the Clippers are going to face when hiring a new head coach? Woj is going to join us at 7:15, but he weighed in on SportsCenter with the answer to that question.
It's a challenging search. I don't think there's an obvious choice out there for them. And, Ty Lue on their own staff, listen, this is a championship coach in his own right. In Cleveland, came in this year very close to Doc Rivers, and by all estimations, made a great impression there. He is a candidate in some other places, including Philadelphia, New Orleans. Our Jeff Van Gundy at ESPN is considered one of the best minds out there. And one of the most accomplished coaches, but
Doc Rivers.
Let's go to Stephen A. Smith. Stephen, what do you make of this news? Doc Rivers out with the Clippers after 7 seasons in Los Angeles.
Well, it's incredibly unfortunate, first of all. You understand to some degree why he's gone, because when you've been coaching a team for 7 years and you haven't been to a conference finals, that's problematic. We understand that. But in this particular instance, when you consider the fact that he's one of the elite coaches in the game, when you consider the fact that they were coaching in a bubble, you had a team, you were coaching a team that basically voted not to be there, which means they didn't want to participate. You had guys like Montrezl Harrell missing about 33 days, Patrick Beverley missing about 18 days, numerous other players missing a slew of days because they were either injured or there were other things that were going on that prevented them from performing. You really didn't have a chance. And then when you consider what transpired in games 6 and 7, when in terms of high percentage shots and things of that nature, they were getting them and guys were just missing. Then you have a leader in Kawhi Leonard, the superstar that you acquired in the offseason, along with Paul George, two individuals that probably would not have come there had it not been for Doc Rivers being the head coach of the franchise, and they don't show up in the game 7. Then it's one of those situations, particularly when you're looking at Kawhi, who is as indifferent as they come in terms of his personality. He's going to work hard. He's going to go on the court. He's going to perform. He's never going to cheat you with effort. But in the end, can you be that leader that galvanizes troops? That was never Kawhi Leonard's MO. So all of those things being stacked against Doc Rivers, what I'm saying is that if he's going to lose his job, you know what, it would have been far more understandable had there never been an interrupted season and he lost under those conditions. But considering the fact that the season was interrupted and then you had guys, the Clippers and the Lakers were the only two teams that voted not to participate in the bubble and not to play, then they came back and played. And unlike the Lakers, you had guys missing games all over the place. For him to lose his job under those conditions are incredibly unfortunate for a coach of his stature. I don't like it at all.
And as you mentioned, this is a team with a couple of big superstars, a lot of good players that come off the bench, a team that I think a lot of coaches would love to coach. So who do you expect the Clippers to now pursue to take over for Doc Rivers?
I have no idea whatsoever because I had no idea. I mean, I suspected that Doc Rivers would probably lose his job because you heard the whispers and what have you. And you imagine all the guys that'll be out there clamoring for this opportunity. And I haven't spoken to Steve Ballmer about this, the billionaire owner for the Los Angeles Clippers as of yet, nor anybody within the Clippers organization, because this just came down. And obviously I wasn't working until I just heard the news. But in the end, I will tell you that any coach out there would want this job. Because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, regardless of how they didn't show up in Game 7, the bottom line is they're stars in this league. And if you consider the plethora of other players that they have on this roster, you might be in need of a quintessential point guard, a literal floor general who can distribute the basketball and stuff like that. But outside of that, all the pieces are there. If they're highly motivated and focused and they want to play, they can beat anybody. Even though it didn't happen, they could still come back. My proposition was that they all come back this season, next season rather. Come back and show what you got and give it to them. And that's what you should do because they'll be more motivated than ever before. But that didn't happen, and now Doc Rivers is going to be on the open market. And teams, for example, like the Philadelphia 76ers, I don't know whether they're going to call him or not. I know this much. They damn well had better call him because as recently as 48 hours ago, it was about Mike D'Antoni, the former coach of the Rockets and the Lakers and the Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. Okay, that guy was a leading candidate for a job. And, of course, Ty Lue. Unless you're going to get Ty Lue or whatever, I don't see how you're the Philadelphia 76ers and you could think about Mike D'Antoni over a Doc Rivers. That better not happen. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, exactly. Going off of that, there's a handful of teams that are looking for a head coach. Where do you think the best fit for Doc Rivers to go to a place could be?
Philly.
Philly. That's the team.
You know, you see a lot of teams still looking for a coach, but definitely Philly. You got a star in Joel Embiid who should have his behind down in the post doing damage, and he should be the second best player definitively on a night in, night out basis, rivaling the Greek Freak. You got a guy in Ben Simmons that Doc Rivers would know how to utilize because he can't shoot. Maybe he'll eventually get some kind of a shot, but he has every single thing else in his arsenal to be a prolific perennial all-star for years to come. It would have been nice if they still had Jimmy Butler and J.J. Redick, but guess what? You don't. But you have Tobias Harris, and you have a few other pieces that you could do something with. With the right coaching, the right motivation, a new fresh start, a new voice. The bottom line is, guess what? You can legitimately, almost instantly compete for Eastern Conference crown. That's what this will come down to as far as I'm concerned. If I was speaking to Doc Rivers, and I haven't spoken to him yet, but I damn well intend to, my thoughts to him would be, go for the Philly job. The Philadelphia 76ers, if you're listening, because as you know, I worked in Philadelphia for 17 years. I know these people. The Philadelphia 76ers, because I know you listening. It damn well better not be Mike D'Antoni ahead of Doc Rivers. Let Mike D'Antoni go to Indiana and coach the Pacers. It better be Doc Rivers over Mike D'Antoni. I can tell you that much. They should be calling Doc Rivers now.
All right. Stephen A. Smith saying Doc goes to Philly. Doc Rivers out with the Clippers after 7 seasons.
Beyond the Western Conference semifinals, including this year when Rivers